until I heard her whisper. This happened when I was around 16. My family and I went on a trip to a small town in the countryside. My parents were always fond of quiet, off-the-beaten-path destinations, and this trip was no different. We were visiting an old family friend who had a farm out there, surrounded by dense woods and the kind of stillness that only a rural area could provide. My family had always been grounded in logic, but I'd heard stories of strange occurrences from my parents, things they brushed off as superstitions. One evening, after a long day of exploring the farm and enjoying the quiet, we were sitting around a fire pit, chatting. My dad's friend told us an odd tale of a woman who used to live in the woods nearby, someone who was rumored to have vanished under mysterious circumstances. As a skeptic, I didn't think much of it. I found the idea of ghost stories charming, but not worth taking seriously. The following morning, my dad's friend suggested I go for a walk through the woods while he prepared lunch. It was a beautiful day, the sun streaming through the trees, birds singing in the distance. So I took off with nothing more than a bottle of water, enjoying the peace of being alone. But after an hour of walking, the woods started to feel different. The path grew narrow and the trees crowded in, casting eerie shadows. I shrugged it off as just my imagination playing tricks on me, but I began to feel watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the odd sensation, but it wasn't until I turned a corner that I heard it, a faint whisper, just barely audible. It sounded like a woman's voice, soft but distinct.
Help me.
I froze. I stood still for a few moments, trying to convince myself it was just the wind or perhaps a distant animal. But no, the voice came again. This time it was clearer.
Help me, please.
It was coming from behind me. I turned around quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no one there. Only the dense woods stretching out into the distance, the shadows shifting in the breeze. Then something strange happened. I felt a presence behind me, like someone was standing right there, just out of sight. My legs felt heavy, and I couldn't move. It was as if the air itself had thickened around me. The whisper came again, this time so close I could feel the chill of it against my ear.
Help me.
Panic surged through me, and I spun around again, but still nothing. I started running, stumbling over branches and rocks as I desperately made my way back to the farm. My heart raced in my chest, and I kept glancing behind me, half expecting to see something or someone following. When I finally burst through the trees and into the clearing near the farmhouse, I could barely catch my breath. My dad's friend was there, just finishing up lunch. He raised an eyebrow as I collapsed into a chair. I didn't speak at first, still trying to regain some semblance of composure. But when I finally did, I told him what happened, how I'd heard the whisper, the eerie sensation of being watched. He didn't seem surprised. Instead, he sighed deeply, as though he'd been expecting me to say something like that. He told me that the woman who'd vanished in the woods all those years ago was rumored to have died under tragic circumstances. Her spirit had never left the forest. It was said that her ghost still wandered the woods, calling for help. Years later, I came back to visit the farm with my parents. One evening, while my dad's friend and I were sitting on the porch, he turned to me and said,
"You know, the whisper you heard that day, it wasn't your imagination."
He told me that not long after I had left the woods, he'd gone up there himself. The same whisper had reached his ears, clearer this time. It's unsettling to think about. The worst part? The voice didn't say, "Help me," just once. After the second time, it had whispered one final thing.
Don't come back.
The tunnel. I grew up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, where the forest stretched for miles and the past lingers in the air like an unshakable ghost. My best friend Caleb and I spent most of our childhood exploring those woods, building forts, following deer trails, and daring each other to venture just a little farther than we should. There was one rule, though, one that even the bravest kids in town never broke. Don't go past the old stone bridge. It was deep in the woods, half hidden by creeping vines and moss, arching over a dried-up creek bed. Nobody knew who built it. There were no roads leading to it, no signs of a path that once existed. Just that bridge, crumbling and forgotten. My grandpa once told me that folks used to avoid it even before his time, that the land around it was hungry. Of course, that only made Caleb and me more curious. One overcast afternoon in late October, We finally worked up the nerve to cross it. The air felt colder the moment we stepped onto the bridge, our breath fogging, even though it wasn't that chilly. A strange pressure settled in my ears, like we had stepped into a place we weren't supposed to be. And then we saw it. Just beyond the bridge, tucked against the side of a hill, was a tunnel. Its entrance was lined with old bricks, worn smooth with age, like it had been carved straight into the earth. The inside was pitch black, swallowing the dim afternoon light.
Did you know this was here?
Caleb asked me. I shook my head. We'd been through these woods 100 times, but neither of us had ever seen this before. The air that drifted from inside smelled damp and stale, like old dirt and something else, something metallic. Caleb picked up a rock and tossed it inside. We listened, waiting for it to hit the ground. It never did. A chill crawled up my spine. The tunnel wasn't that deep, 20, maybe 30 feet at most, but there was no sound, just silence, thick and unnatural. Then from deep inside came a sound, a single breath, not the wind, not an echo, a slow, deliberate inhale, followed by a rasping exhale, like something was just inside, waiting. We ran. We sprinted across the bridge, crashing through the underbrush, not stopping until we reached my house. My mom scolded us for tracking mud inside, but I barely heard her. My mind was still back in that tunnel, still hearing that breath. That night, I dreamed of the tunnel. In my dream, I was standing at the entrance again, staring into the darkness. Except this time, something was staring back. Two dim, hollow eyes watching from the void. And then, just before I woke up, I heard it again. A breath. We never found the tunnel again. Even when we returned a few days later, determined to prove to ourselves that it was real, it was just gone. The bridge was still there, crumbling and ancient. But beyond it was nothing but untouched forest. No tunnel, no bricks, no trace of what we had seen. Caleb doesn't like to talk about it, and honestly, I don't either. But every now and then, when I'm alone in the woods, I swear I still hear it. That slow, steady breath, waiting.